Hi there, Jeff from Practical Creation here. Today I wanted to start a series that I've had in planning for quite some time on the subject of world building. There's a lot of good series out on YouTube and in other places talking about the subject of building a world for a variety of mediums. These mediums might be films such as television or movies, for books or short stories or comic books or video games or even tabletop games. I wanted to talk about my own experiences and wisdom I've gained from just building fictional worlds and all of the things that go into doing so. This will be the first in many videos on world design, where I go into specific topics and talk about what that topic does and how it helps to just build the world that you're trying to create. Today I just want to start with an introduction of the crucial parts of building a fictional world. The first part I want to talk about is, what is a fictional world? That seems like a really basic question to ask, almost too basic. But I think it takes out some important things that people don't usually consider when building a fictional world. That is the world entirely different than the one we live in? I think one of the more important parts of building a fictional world is creating a world that is both familiar and relatable to our own, but has fantastical elements that aren't normally possible in our world, are extremely unlikely, or simply just have different things in the world or more exaggerated things than exist in our own world. A fictional world is one that has aspects or things that we don't have in our world, but at the same time has things that we can relate to as consumers of that medium. Now that we've decided what a fictional world is and what the definition of a fictional world is, I want to move on to the different elements of a fictional world. The three main elements of any fictional world you will ever create are people, objects, and locations. People, or characters, include your protagonists, your antagonists, any enemies or allies that the protagonists, or in certain circumstances your consumer, will have in that fictional world. Additionally, this will include anyone they interact with over the course of the story or the medium that you are working with. Characters that appear off-screen, per se, are not crucial to the story, and therefore they aren't really things you need to take into consideration. There's a lot of stuff out there, specifically for writing mediums, that say you're going to create a world where you know 90% more than you're going to use, or you're only ever going to use 10% of the world you create. Now, I think in a lot of circumstances that's going to be overkill, because you'll spend more time creating stuff that is never going to be used or is never going to be consumed versus the stuff that's actually going to be important and relevant to the story or the medium that you are trying to create and the world that you're trying to create. Characters are going to make up the backbone of the world you're creating. They will serve to contrast and to challenge your protagonists in any way they can, and will drive the story forward in a lot of mediums such as film or television or written mediums. More interactive mediums, it might be up to the consumer to decide what exactly they're going to interact with. I think it's essential to come up with interesting, rich, engaging characters for your consumer to see and to just really help flesh out the world that you're trying to create. The next thing we're going to talk about is objects. Objects are things in your universe, in your world you're trying to build, that characters can interact with. Like your protagonists, your antagonists, and everything in between. The objects will be things that those characters can use to influence the world around them or to influence the other characters. Objects are purely inanimate and do not have sentience. Any object that reacts back to the other characters in the story ceases to be an object but becomes a character. In the future, I plan on making at least a short video to cover the subject of an object as a character. But for now, we will assume that any object that has sentience is considered a character rather than just an object. Locations are the third thing we're going to talk about. Locations occupy a very specific niche because they are simultaneously objects and characters, or a combination of objects and characters. Locations might be geography and man-made structures and other objects and the people who inhabit these locations. Those four things will make up the bulk of any given location. Locations are interesting because they tend to have their own personality and they have a way of reacting and responding to the things that the protagonist or your consumers do to it. And in that way, locations are not like objects, but are rather more like characters in and of themselves, but operate on a much grander scale than the typical character. So, for the sake of creating a world, I like to look at locations as something bigger than a character, something less easily tamed than a character. A location is a city full of people that's bustling with lots of technology for your character to interact with, but also serves as barriers for your characters. A city is a good example, but so is a forest. A forest might have a small village of people, or wildlife, or trees, or rough terrain that serve as obstacles and also respond and react to the things your characters do. If your character tries to steal a car from someone in a city, that city is going to respond to them with police, or with force, or with crime, or the person they're trying to steal the taxi from. If your person's walking through a forest and they decide to make a lot of noise, that might attract the attention of the locals or local beasts. And therefore, these locations are things that respond and react as if they were characters, but on a much larger scale. These three things are not all-encompassing, but they are on the foundational level. There are a lot of other things to take into consideration, such as communication and travel and conflict and geography and landmarks and more detail on characters that I'm not going to cover in this video, but I will cover in future videos as I kind of get inspiration to do so. There are a lot of other people who've talked about world building in different aspects. I'm going to include a list of some of my favorites at the end of this video. But I hope this helps you to get thinking about the building of a fictional world.
Alors tu vois comme tout se mêle, et du cœur à tes lèvres, je deviens un casse-tête. Ton rire me crie de te lâcher avant de perdre prise et d'abandonner, car je ne t'en demanderai jamais autant. Déjà que tu me traites comme